Hey, what's up, everybody? Logan Harless coming to you live from Illinois Aviation Academy for our next Wednesday webinar event. Tonight, I'd like to start off with a couple announcements from the Academy. First off, congratulations to David Below on earning your private pilot license, as well as Daniel Kransberger also received his private pilot license earlier today. So very good job, guys. We're still moving forward here and keep up the good work. I'd like to introduce our guest for tonight. Our guest will be Mr. Tim Genc, and he is the Director of Pilot Recruitment at Air Wisconsin. Very interesting guy. He's been a part of Air Wisconsin for many, many years. It's going to give you a really good chance to ask some questions. I've got some questions I'll be going through with him regarding hiring, training, as well as what the future looks like for regional airlines, as well as Air Wisconsin. So again, we're following this on Facebook Live. So any questions you guys have, you would like me to ask Mr. Tim Genc, please don't hesitate to post them below, and we'll get to them as time permits. So let me go ahead and bring Mr. Genc on. Hey, Tim.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, doing well. How have you been?
I've been fantastic. Long time no talk.
Yeah, how about it? Hopefully you've been able to stay busy through the current pandemic we're facing.
Yeah, definitely doing everything I can. It's obviously not nearly as active as it was maybe about 2.5, 3 months ago, but there's still a lot of people with a lot of questions and very interested in aviation. It still is a fantastic time to try to go ahead and get into the industry. So it's keeping me just busy enough to not pull any more hair out of the top of my head.
That's great. Doesn't look like you got many left to pull out. So
yeah, well, I've been doing this for a while.
Great. Well, I want to just thank you for joining us tonight and taking the time out of your evening to answer some questions and help spread the word of aviation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Happy to do it.
Great. So we'll start. I'm just going to go through a little bit about the history of Air Wisconsin. So Air Wisconsin opened in 1965. They've been in business now for 55 years, and they opened to connect a route from Appleton, Wisconsin to Chicago. So they had one route, 17 employees, and they were flying the British Dove twin prop here in the picture, which is pretty neat. Then in 1978, they actually became certified as a regional carrier. Now in the mid-70s, they would have been flying the Twin Otter and the Metro, with their main hub being O'Hare, Chicago, servicing Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, as well as St. Paul and Minneapolis from other small airports in Wisconsin. In 1982, they became a part of ALPA, and in 85, merged with Mississippi Valley Airlines and continued operating under Air Wisconsin's name. Then in the mid 80s, so the Air Wisconsin was really the pioneer of code sharing. And so they were the ones that established the code share, which allowed multiple airlines to market the same flight under their specific distinct code, which is what we see all the airlines doing nowadays. And this led to them becoming the largest airline, regional airline in the United States in the 80s. After the 80s, in 1989, they started flying under United as a United Express carrier. In 1990, they acquired the Denver-based Aspen Airways, which opened up the Western territory for them, started bringing them out west. And by 1998, they had acquired the assets of Mountain Air Express and started operating the Dornier 328. Then came 2003. Started operations under an AirTran agreement after they acquired 10 CRJs from the bankrupt Midway Airlines. And then in 2005, they invested $175 million into U.S. Airways in trade for a long-term contract and started operating all of their CRJs. Since then, U.S. Airways merged with American, so Air Wisconsin became a carrier for American Eagle through a code share agreement. And now we find you back with United. And so you are solely a United Airlines, United Express carrier with anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 employees, generating 100 to 500 million a year and carrying an estimate of 5 million passengers each year. And since then, you've standardized the fleet. So you're just operating the CRJ 200s, which are pretty efficient aircraft in terms of their competitors, in terms of fuel burn and distance they're able to travel. So they can travel, approximately 1,600 nautical miles, carrying 50 passengers. Why have a standardized fleet? So how does that help the airline?
It from a maintenance standpoint, it gives us one thing to do. From a training standpoint, it gives us one thing to do. From a recruiting pilot standpoint, it gives us one thing to recruit for. There can always be a little bit of hurt feelings if there's a particular airplane you want when you go to an airline and you end up not getting assigned that. It makes my job a little bit easier. This is what we go ahead and fly. From a maintenance standpoint, this is what we need to go ahead and keep parts for. This is what we need to go ahead and have hangars that go ahead and take care of it. That single faceted fleet really just kind of makes it that much more efficient, streamlines everything we do.
Absolutely. And I suppose it helps with safety as well. You're standardized across the board. So the pilots know, what cockpit they're getting to day after day. So moving on to your route, you guys cover pretty much Denver all the way to the East Coast. Your main hubs being O'Hare and Washington, D.C., Dulles Airport down there. You also have a hub in South Carolina, Columbia, and Milwaukee as well. And like you said, these routes often change, right?
They do. I was talking to somebody just a couple months ago before kind of all the craziness started, saying, can I get an updated route map? And it's always a joke when I ask that question. And she goes, sure, but by the time you open it, it will be outdated. Because things do go ahead and change. United is constantly asking us to do different things, adding routes, subtracting routes. Flying into North Florida is one of the newest changes that happened going into Panama City. And again, this is something that changes all the time. When we last left our heroes a couple months ago before things started changing, we were hub and spoking to about a dozen cities out of Denver, and we don't quite show that on this route map right now, but it's an ever-changing world.
That it is. So I'm going to start with some questions for you. Being a part of United rolled out their Aviate program not too long ago, and Wisconsin Air Wisconsin is a big part of that. So could you describe this program for us, as well as its current status?
Absolutely. So the Aviate program was introduced in November of last year. So it's not a very old program. Like any new programs, they're constantly tweaking it and changing it to make sure that it makes the most amount of sense and it's operating smoothly. The running joke that I always would tell people is that the plan for Aviate is written in someone's driveway in Seattle in chalk. And every time it rains, the program changes a little bit. You've got to redefine it. So staying up and running with it, staying on top of it has been a lot. But the Aviate program is the closest thing to a flow that would exist with Air Wisconsin and who we fly for, which is United. And there are 4 of the United Express partners that work with the Aviate program. There's about 5 or 6 airlines that do go ahead and fly for United, but there's only 4 of them that are considered the partners. Air Wisconsin is one of them, Mesa Airlines, Commute Air, and ExpressJet. And so what would happen is once you are within 6 months of having a job offer with one of those 4 airlines, is one of the way that the Aviate program works. Within 6 months of a start date with one of those. So you've already interviewed with one of those airlines. You've received a job offer. You're continuing to build your hours and experience. And let's say it's 6 months until your class date. You can apply to the Aviate program at that time. United is going to go and take a look at all the qualifications. They're going to go ahead and have you do a bunch of facets of an interview. There's going to be 2 online kind of personality tests that you're going to go ahead and do. There's going to be an HR interview, and there's going to be a technical interview. And one of the biggest things that's different with the Aviate program as opposed to the predecessor of the Aviate program, which is called the Career Path program or the CPP program, is United is then going to take a look at the entire package, everything together. And then they're going to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to go ahead and be invited to kind of sit in the waiting room to join United. So if you're accepted into the Aviate program, you learn that about a week after your interview, so it's pretty fast. And it's kind of crazy to think that before you even start your first regional airline job, you already know what your next and possibly last job in aviation is going to be, flying with United. You've already landed that. So during that time, you just have to stay working for that United Express carrier. You've got to be with them for 2 years. During that time, you've got to build a certain number of hours of total time. It's 2,000 hours total time or 1,500 hours of total time if you're flying, if you get upgraded to captain. And once you achieve those minimums, so as early as 2 years after being with a regional, the Aviate program can call you up to United. It's not compulsory. If United calls and says, good news, I can get you in class, you're not required to go ahead and do it. So on paper, that is the way the Aviate program was supposed to go ahead and work. Is 2 years realistic? It's hard for us to say because the program had been around for less than 6 months when kind of everything went ahead and happened in the aviation industry, everything that we're dealing with right now. It was designed to be an improvement upon its predecessor, the Career Path program. The Career Path program was flowing people United at about 5 years. So assuming the Aviate program was designed to replicate, if not improve upon that, it's 5 years or less is what we would anticipate. Again, it was operating for such a small period of time before kind of everything had to stop for us to go and have any statistical proof that 2 years is something that will happen. So that is how the Aviate program works. What is the status of it right now? Kind of the status of a lot of things. It is on hold right now. Whether or not before we went ahead and had to stop everything, they were interviewing about 100 candidates a week to go and take a look at the Aviate program. Right now, everything is kind of in a holding pattern as we're continuing to wait and see how the industry is going to respond to the world starting to open back up starting in June. June is an exciting month for aviation. It's really a chance to see what's happening and kind of starting to ramp everything back up to where we were not that long ago. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So you think this is definitely going to be a program that you guys will continue with, once everything gets flowing again. It sounds like a really great opportunity for young pilots who have the ambition to go to an airline.
It definitely is. The nice thing about having Aviate is kind of the same thing. It's kind of nice for. Yep. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you now.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. The nice thing about the Aviate program, the Aviate program is to Air Wisconsin what Air Wisconsin is to a school like Illinois Aviation Academy. All right, hang on. I'm going to go ahead and switch devices here and see if that helps us a little bit more. I went ahead and I'm trying to join into my phone. Yeah. Obviously, having a little bit of connection issues with that. So, all right. Can you hear me?
Hey, there you are. Yeah, we got you now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry about that. Having some tech issues there. Again, the nice thing about Aviate is to Air Wisconsin what Air Wisconsin is to Illinois Aviation Academy. It's knowing that the step that you're interested in is already laid at your feet. So when someone comes to an Illinois Aviation Academy because they want to be a career pilot, knowing that there are some relationships with other airlines, it looks good. They know that there is the next step that interests them right after that. And it's the same thing with the Aviate program. Someone comes to Air Wisconsin. As much as I would love to say that people come to Air Wisconsin because that's what they want their lifelong job to be, we know that the purpose of a regional carrier, it's usually not the aviation dream, it's the vestibule to the dream. It is the step somebody has to take to go and get to that next step in their aviation career. So coming to Air Wisconsin and knowing that before you even start at Air Wisconsin or relatively early in your start at Air Wisconsin, that next step is already guaranteed. There's a lot of peace of mind that goes along with that.
All of that being said, flying for Air Wisconsin does not mean you have to go ahead and go to United. So.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, definitely for someone interested. My next question for you. So I know that Air Wisconsin is not the largest regional carrier anymore. They were in the 80s. So they're on the smaller scale. What effect does being a smaller operation have on the culture at Air Wisconsin, and how would you describe this culture?
Sure, and a very good question. No, we are no longer the largest regional. We're still the largest privately held regional, but when you compare us to the other regionals, we are on the smaller side. Pilot group of about 560. It's not the smallest, but it's pretty darn close to it. What that means, I think about the Illinois Aviation Academy family as compared to somebody somewhere that maybe just turns out a whole lot more pilots. If you have a smaller, more tight-knit group of people, you have the ability to go ahead and get to know everybody. You have the ability to know the flight instructor you're flying with today. You've got the ability to know everybody in the company. Air Wisconsin is a relatively flat company. What do I mean by that? There aren't these enormous ivory towers that you have to climb to get to decision makers. Pilots report to a chief who reports to a national chief who reports to the president. That's about where it goes. It's not uncommon at all for our pilots to have direct contact with vice presidents and presidents because of the way our company is situated. So I know everybody says we're not a company, we're more like a family. And it's a cliche that you go ahead and hear sometimes from companies. So I'm not going to go ahead and use that same cliche. What I will go and say is whoever you are when you interview with Air Wisconsin, that's who we want you to be when you start flying with Air Wisconsin, because that individuality, that uniqueness that makes you you, that is what makes this company so much fun to work with. Every time somebody moves on to bigger and faster things in the airline, we always do an exit interview and we ask them, what was your favorite thing about Air Wisconsin? Without hesitation, Logan, the answer that we always get is the people. They love the people. And the reason people love the people is they're allowed to be who they are. We're not trying to turn everybody into a robot. Obviously, there's standardization for safety reasons that goes on in the cockpit. But as far as who you are, we want you to be who you are. So that's a big thing about the culture. That's how I would describe it. That's what being a smaller airline means, is we're a company that takes care of our own. We do try to go ahead and run it a little bit more like a tight-knit group of people. That extends all the way into some of our benefits and some of the other ways that we support our pilots.
That's great. Yeah, it's got to be nice, knowing who you're going to be flying with. You're not just another number. You get to build those connections. Definitely nice to have. My next question, what kind of opportunities does...
I was talking to one pilot that had moved on. Sorry, Logan, you there?
Yep, I got you now. You still got me?
Yep, I got you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so my next question would be, what kind of extra opportunities does Air Wisconsin offer your pilot groups?
The biggest thing is when you come to Air Wisconsin as a pilot, you don't have to spend your entire time at Air Wisconsin only as a pilot. You certainly have the opportunity to do so. There's tons of the ability to pick up extra time, make a lot of money, or earn a lot of flight time. But if you love aviation, and that's why you got into aviation, that's why you got into the airlines, you want to share that passion with other people, there are tons of programs at Air Wisconsin. The training program is not the old program, is not the and have the opportunity to do that. If you want to share your passion in a different way and go ahead and see what you can do to get more pilots in there and assist in the recruiting side of things, we do draw from our pilot group to go and help us out on recruiting trips. Whether it's doing interviews, whether it's visiting a school like an Illinois Aviation Academy, or whether it's going to the Greater Alaska Aviation Gathering, which is like the Alaskan version of Oshkosh that they do every May. we need pilots to go ahead and do that. If you are an analytical kind of person and you love statistics and want to get involved in the SMS, the safety kind of monitoring side of the company, you can do that. The moral of the story is the possibilities and the opportunities are limitless. We're a company. Yes, we are an airline, but we're also a company. We have HR departments, we've got IT departments, we've got legal affairs departments. Whatever it ends up being that you want to do, chances are we would love to go ahead and be able to do that with you. We'd love to see what we can to go ahead and give you the chance to flex those creative muscles any way that you want outside of just the cockpit.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome. You got, plenty of opportunities for professional development and growth, and very, very nice to know. So at what point can an individual begin with the application process for Air Wisconsin, and what about hire?
Sure. The purest answer to that question is we can go ahead and start the interview process when you are within 6 months of meeting your ATP minimums, the first officer interview process. As far as when you could start actually in training, you can start in training when you're 50 hours away from your ATP totals and 25 hours away from your multi-engine time totals. So if you qualify for an unrestricted ATP, which is normally 1,500 hours, 50 hours of multi-engine time, and then a bunch of other numbers in there, we can put you in class at 1,450 hours and 25 hours of multi. So basically, when you're 6 months from that point, we could start talking to you about becoming a first officer for Air Wisconsin, get that interview taken care of, so you know what you need to wrap up over that next 6 months to go ahead and start your regional airline career.
Great. Now, once you do get hired, what does that training footprint look like for Air Wisconsin, and what do you guys provide?
Yeah, it is pretty involved. With most people, the training footprint is going to start with the ATP CTP course, and that's that course that was created in the wake of the Colgan Air incident. That is somewhere between about 10 days and 2 weeks of training, and that starts off your training with us. That's going to be 2 weeks. That flows right into the start of your first officer training with Air Wisconsin, which will be up in Appleton, Wisconsin. It's our national headquarters, our training headquarters. It is smack dab between Green Bay and Oshkosh, 30 minutes from either one of them. It is a town that is kind of fun. It does have an evening life. So when you are there training, there's definitely some fun places to eat while you are studying. But it's going to be 2 weeks of what we call INDOC. INDOC is basic company onboarding. Then it's going to be 2 weeks of systems education, where you're learning the ins and outs of the CRJ pretty darn well. The goal is not for you to be able to fix the airplane when you're on the road, but to understand enough about what's going on behind the firewall and under the skin that you can troubleshoot things and assist the maintenance department if there do happen to be maintenance issues. So when that 2 weeks now is done, at this point, assuming you needed CTP, you're about 6 weeks, into your training, we're going to give you a little bit of paid time off. We're going to send you home for somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks. You are paid this entire time. From the start of it, you've been paid. You're being paid as a first officer. You're paid when we go ahead and send you home to continue studying. When we bring you back, we're going to bring you back to one of our sim training centers, which are all across the United States. In some places, we'll send you all across the world. The first week of your simulator training is what we call CPT, cockpit procedure training. It's going to be you sitting in front of some sort of rendering or representation of the CRJ-200, whether it's a poster, whether it's cardboard cutouts, whether it's a computerized device, or whether you're in an actual aircraft hooked up to ground power. You are going to be basically taking everything that you learned as an instrument pilot and everything that you learned in systems, and now starting to have that be represented on that cockpit. You're not flying it yet. You're just learning where everything is. You're chair flying, basically. After that, you'll be about 2 weeks of simulator training, where we're going through tons of emergencies. You're actually taking your knowledge and putting it into the simulated environment, going a couple 100 miles an hour through the air, lots of simulated emergencies and everything. When all of that is done, and that's where your check ride happens. It's your ATP check ride. It's your type rating for the CRJ. When all of that is done, we're going to give you just a few days off, pretty much to go home and get a change of clothes, because now we start what's called IOE, or initial operating experience. Initial operating experience is where we now take all of your knowledge that you've learned in a controlled educational environment, and you are practicing it in a CRJ. The captain sitting next to you is what we call a line check airman. He's basically an airline flight instructor, and it's his job to help you take the information that you've learned and bring it to the real world, And there are also 50 people sitting behind you that don't know this is your first time ever flying an airplane. These are live flights. When all of that process is done, you are done. And go forth, sin no more. You're officially a first officer for Air Wisconsin. So from start to finish, you're probably looking at about 4 or so months of pretty concentrated training. It is a lot. It's something that you've got to put a lot of effort in there. You've got to go ahead and meet us halfway when it comes to all the information. The people that have got the right attitude, the people that are putting in the time, putting in the effort, those are the people that are successful in the training. One of the gentlemen that we work with likes to say your attitude determines your altitude. The way that you approach this determines how far and how successful you are going to go ahead and be in your training.
Great. We have a question that came in.
Sure.
Someone wants to know, does Air Wisconsin hire pilots with a first-class medical substitute granted by the FAA?
A first-class medical substitute. I'm not exactly sure what that is. If it's something granted by the FAA, as long as it would qualify as a first-class medical, I have a feeling the answer would be yes. But I also have a feeling that this is a very, very specific question. I'd probably want to go ahead and talk to this individual in person just to get a little bit more knowledge about what exactly this means, what some of the limitations imposed on it would be. I wouldn't want to misspeak. So maybe whether I can provide an email address right now, or maybe at the end of all of this, if we could put that up, I'd love to have the chance to chat with that individual personally.
Great. Just another question that came to me is, do you know what your washout rate is by chance in your training?
I do. About 25%. About 25% of people are unfortunately not able to go ahead and succeed in training. I don't know if that number is good. I don't know if that number is bad. I know that it ebbs and flows when you compare it to some of the other airlines. Our training program is not easy. It is probably one of the more thorough training programs that's out there. We want our pilots to be very, very educated, very, very confident. You can't have a high standard without having a failure rate, unfortunately. We don't pass everybody. If we did, I'm not sure if I could go ahead and be sitting here bragging about some of the knowledge and proficiency that Air Wisconsin pilots have the reputation for. So unfortunately, we do have a dropout rate. It's about 25%.
Absolutely. And so if you do drop out, what does that process look like? Can they come back and reapply with you?
You can. It really depends on the nature of the dismissal. Again, if there was a bunch of stuff that was happening to you, if there was a death in the family, if there was a bunch of other things that were going on, and you kind of got a little bit distracted and needed to leave for that reason, or maybe there was a lapse in some of your skill for that reason, and you leave on good terms, absolutely. Spend a little bit of time outside, get life taken care of, get your head back in the game, and we would love to have the opportunity to work with you again. If the reason for your departure is going back to that attitude side of things, then it's a little bit of a different story. Attitude goes a very, very long way.
Sure it does. And so once someone does get hired on with Air Wisconsin, what type of support, what type of assistance programs and benefits does Air Wisconsin offer their employees?
Sure. I mean, obviously, one of them is the Aviate program. Most people will have taken advantage of that Aviate program prior to that. But again, all airlines are really options. Flying for Air Wisconsin does not mean you have to go to United. Our pilots go wherever they want. Every airline is going to do kind of the same things for you. They're going to give you turbine time. They're going to give you jet time. They're going to give you time flying in the airline world. And they're going to pay you a lot of money to do that. The difference is how you enjoy your time there. And very often that enjoyment is tied to how the company takes care of you. Small company, try to go ahead and have more of that family feel. That means we need to take care of our own. Some of the ways we do that, the biggest way we do that is our medical insurance. Our medical insurance is the best in the industry. Unless you end up being a pilot for FedEx, you are not going to find better insurance than what we go ahead and have. As a matter of fact, if you do end up getting part of the Aviate program and you go from Air Wisconsin to United, when you go to United, your medical insurance will get worse because no one can touch the medical insurance that we offer. One of our previous
Wow.
chief pilots called it the $15 baby program because when his wife had a C-section, it was a $15 copay. I think he ended up paying an additional $35, but that was his share of the room service while he was there. But that medical insurance is pretty robust. It covers just about everything. We have stories from people that have incurred hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenses due to injuries or accidents, and when our insurance is done with it, they're paying a fraction of all of that. That's one of the biggest things that we do. Another way that we support our pilots is with our 401k retirement program. Our 401k contribution and the way that everything works is 2 times more aggressive than the rest of the regionals, 3 times as aggressive as some of them. Really gives you a chance to start planning for your retirement very, very early on. That's how pilots get the chance to go and buy their Stearmans or go ahead and buy their beach stagger wings, is everything that goes into that. So that starts accumulating pretty well. A lot of little things that the company does that gives you that wonderful feel. The biggest one that comes to mind is we've got a wellness program that basically gives you an incentive to stay healthy. Pilots have to get a medical. Pilots have to stay in good shape to go and provide a little bit of extra motivation. The wellness program rewards you for walking, for exercising, for working out. You build points. I mean, literally spending a day walking through the airport, you will accumulate a bunch of points. You can trade those points in for Nike gift cards, Amazon gift cards to Under Armour, you name it. There's a bunch of different cards are available. It's pretty crazy being able to go ahead and go to the Nike outlet shop here by us in Aurora with a gift card that I got for working out. It's pretty crazy, but it's little tiny things like that the company has got available. Some education assistance programs, hardship assistant programs when life manages to rear its ugly head. It's a lot of things like that the company does to take care of its people that really makes you feel good about the company for which you work.
That's great. Yeah, that's amazing. What would be some of the, so you're the director of pilot recruitment, so I assume that you take part in many pilot interviews. What are some of the most common reasons that you would decide not to hire an applicant?
You know what? They're so common, and that we actually, and to try to go ahead and stack the deck in everybody's favor, when we invite someone for an interview, we send them a document called the 5 Ps of a successful interview. And we send that to them to tell them, this is what you should do because these are some of the biggest reasons people are not successful. And those 5 Ps are punctual, prepared, professional, pleasant, and proficient. Punctual. We expect you to be on time. We are Air Wisconsin. We're from Wisconsin. There's a little football team in Wisconsin most people know about. They had a very famous coach named Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi had his own type of time. It was called Lombardi time. Vince Lombardi time is if you are 10 minutes early or 5 minutes late. He went on the 15 minutes early is on time. Be on time to your interview. When you are on time, even when you're early, you have options. When you're late, you have excuses. One of those looks very good. One of them does not. There's nothing that looks worse for a candidate when I'm 20 minutes into a presentation that I started on time, and all of a sudden somebody walks across the room and sits down for an interview. Be on time for your interview. Plan for the unexpected. Get there really, really early so you know where it is, and then find a Starbucks and chill out. Be on time. Prepared. We're pilots. We love our checklists. Checklists tell you exactly what you need to go ahead and do. We're going to go ahead and send you a checklist when you interview saying, here are all the things that we expect you to have ready. It's very simple. Have all of those things ready. If we say bring 2 copies of this, 1 copy of this, and fill this stuff out, do that. We understand that you might forget one. I had 2 copies. I only grabbed 1. Not a problem. You can make a second copy. But when you show up for an interview with absolutely nothing that we asked you to bring, that interview is not going to go very well for you because you have just told us that this doesn't matter to you. You've got to go ahead and be prepared. You've got to be a professional. That's suit and tie, or that's pantsuit, whatever it ends up being. That is looking like a professional. Think of how a pilot is dressed. That's how you should go ahead and dress. The way that you carry yourself, the way that you speak, interacting with other people. When I'm doing the presentation, if you're playing Fortnite and don't think it hasn't happened, that doesn't look good. That is not a professional. That is not someone that's going to get the job. People falling asleep. It doesn't look good. Something as simple as taking notes, even if you're never going to look at those notes again, just take notes so you understand what's going on. Show us that you care about this position. Pleasant, polite, please, thank you, yes, sir, no, ma'am. The old manners 101 stuff still works pretty well. And the last thing, one of the biggest things, is proficiency. You are applying for a job to fly 50 paying passengers around, mostly in an instrument environment. You should be ready to do that. If you come for the interview and you haven't had an instrument proficiency check in a year and a half, it's hard for us to say, let's put you into a very difficult training program, because we're going to have to spend part of it reteaching you to be an instrument pilot. Those are the biggest reasons people aren't successful. It's frustrating when we see that, because on the front end, we tell people, this is the stuff you need to know. These are the things that you need to do. If you follow these 5 Ps, your chance of success is pretty darn good. The biggest one of those that we see knocking people out of the running are prepared. They didn't check the email. They did not prepare themselves. They didn't do the studying of a document that we told them to go ahead and do, and they don't understand it. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And you went ahead. We got some great questions coming in, so thank you guys. And you answered one of them there. The question was, what do you find the biggest weakness to be with new hired pilots? Is it lack of instrument flying ability?
yes, it is going to be. You need to be a current and proficient pilot. You need to be, I wouldn't even say you need to be a current and proficient instrument pilot, because currency is the signature. Proficiency is 1 hour flying every 6 months. You need to be instrument check ride ready, because we are going to take your skills and all we're going to do is hit the fast forward button. You don't have to be a jet pilot, but you've got to be a really good Cessna 172 instrument pilot. Good instrument procedures can be sped up and still be effective. Unfortunately, bad instrument procedures get sped up even that much faster. So really good instrument knowledge is the biggest challenge that we go ahead and see.
For sure. A follow-up to that question was, would it also, or have you seen it, a weakness being that a candidate not have experience in a crew-served environment? And would you think that this sort of training before being hired would be a big asset?
Obviously, working in a crew environment is something that's helpful. Talking to a school like Illinois Aviation Academy, that isn't the problem, because you guys have a crew environment there. You call it flight instruction. That absolutely is a crew environment. Simply put, the job of a captain is to take the person next to him and turn him into his replacement. That's the same job that a flight instructor has. A flight instructor, a captain, they're just instructors working in an environment where everybody is supposed to be thinking as one. So if you're building your hours and experience CFI, you're building good CRM. If you are building it in a solo environment, I definitely would recommend trying to get yourself in some sort of crew environment before you go ahead and get into training, because it's fantastic having multiple heads in there, but it also means you need to communicate with multiple people. If that's not something with which you're familiar, it is going to be a steep learning curve.
Thank you for that. One other question that came in here is, does Air Wisconsin have any programs for younger pilots in terms of like high school age?
You know, for the high school age, we don't, not yet. We do have a cadet program for pilots who already got their commercial pilot certificate and there are some hours under their belt. We're taking this downtime to revamp and improve that program. But as far as somebody that's in high school, not just yet. What I would tell anybody that wants to be a pilot, wants to be a professional pilot that's still in high school, is to participate in as many things like this as they can, whether it's a webinar, whether there's going to be an airline association having a meeting in the Chicago area, whether it's a virtual career fair somewhere else. Participate every chance you can to learn more and more about aviation. If you're still in high school, you have no pressure to go ahead and make a decision just yet, and you just become a sponge and suck up all this information. So when you are ready to pick an airline, and there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all airline. I wish there was, and I wish it was Air Wisconsin. My job would be a lot easier. But when you do get ready to pick an airline, if you've been attending all of the things like this since high school, you are going to know exactly what you want out of your aviation career, and you're going to know exactly the company that can provide that to you. So that would be my biggest advice to anybody that is younger, high school, maybe even early college, is go to and attend any aviation event you can to get information.
Great advice. Great. My next question is going to lead into, so given the current situation we're facing now with the whole COVID, what do you think will happen next? When will we see an increase in hiring rates? So out of the 64 CRJs that Air Wisconsin has, over half of them are currently parked. So one of the questions that I come in is, has Air Wisconsin stopped or modified training levels with the current industry slowdown, which I'd have to imagine you have. But when do you see these picking back up again? The last crisis similar to this would have been September 11th of 2001. It took 3 years due to that fear and speculation of people not wanting to fly. It took about 3 years before we recovered from that in terms of passenger count and seats being flown. Do you think it's going to take that long?
I don't. By the way, and if I was a guru and if I could wave my magic wand and actually have that answer, life would be fantastic. But I don't think it's going to take that long, Logan. And you brought up a fantastic example of 9/11, and I love using that as an example. And the reason I love using that as an example is 9/11 was a tragedy, and it was a tragedy that happened right in the middle of an aviation hiring market that was awful. We went from a bad hiring market to a national tragedy, back into a bad hiring market that continued moving on for a period of time. I interviewed in 2002 for my first airline job. The interview went well, and I was offered $14,600 a year to go and be an airline pilot. That was the industry. You didn't interview with multiple airlines at that time. Whoever actually called you, that's where you went. That was it. It was that simple. So fast forward to where we were 3 months ago. This is the most incredible aviation hiring market we have ever seen right now because of an insanely massive pilot shortage that we have got. Now, what just happened is we just got hit ourselves with a tragedy, and it did stop everything, but it stopped an amazing pilot market. I was at Illinois Aviation Academy about a week or so ago. And the example I use is, imagine that the aviation industry is a busy playground at a grammar school at 8:50 in the morning that's getting ready to start. Cars are going by on the road. People are playing, bunch of stuff, whistles, kids screaming, and all of a sudden a bunch of kids want to cross the road. So the crossing guard steps out into that 30-mile-an-hour road, holds up the sign, because there's a bunch of kids that need to cross. The first car stops, the second car stops, the third car stops, and before you know it, cars stopped a mile back. Now that crossing guard moves. That first car is going to pick up to 30 miles an hour really fast. That second car will get back up to 30 miles an hour, not quite as fast. By the time you get to that car that stopped a mile back, it's going to take them a while to get to a real speed. But that block, that obstruction, that crossing guard has gone away, and there's nothing to go and stop everybody from going full speed ahead and getting themselves back up to speed. That is what's happened in the hiring market. An amazingly busy time was just told, stop. No one is flying anymore. If we take a look at the TSA numbers over the last several weeks, we can look at the end of April, TSA numbers were just barely over 100,000. Last week, they were up at 300,000. So people have been building. People are traveling again. I was at O'Hare Airport yesterday, and it's looking a whole lot busier than it was a month ago. But the biggest thing that's about to happen, why everybody is saying June is going to be a telling month, is states are now opening back up. It's hard to see travel increasing when there's nowhere to travel in the United States because everything that's fun is closed. Fun things are starting to open up again. So I think we're going to see that June starts picking things up. When things start picking up, when there's more people that now want to travel, the airlines are going to have to reintroduce more of their aircraft into the fleet. Right now, United has cut about 90% of their flying. They're already starting to dial some of that back in preparation for June, which is exciting. But the more people travel, they need more airplanes. The more airplanes they need, the more pilots they need for that. It's going to take some period of time for that to ramp up. I cannot see it being 3 years. So that's, I think, what we're going to see. The first pilots that are going to go ahead and go back in are going to be the pilots that are maybe on reserve schedules. The second pilots that are going to go back are going to be any furloughed pilots. We don't currently have any of those. The next pilots that we're going to need are going to be all those pilots that were scheduled for training events with us, but we needed to go ahead and delay those. And we've got about 65 pilots that fell into that category. 65 phone calls I needed to go and make on the 18th of March to tell them, I got to stop your class. That was a difficult phone call to make once. To make it 65 times was awful. And what's going on? Sorry about that. But those are going to be the next pilots to go. When all of that is done, now is going to go ahead and be the pilots that we're going to start interviewing and are going to be seeing Air Wisconsin for the first time. So that's kind of the hierarchy of what hiring is going to look like when we start it back up again. It really all depends on when the industry needs more pilots again. Unfortunately, COVID on a very temporary basis has fixed the pilot shortage issue because they've cut aviation in a tiny, tiny piece. It is going to come back as people want to start traveling again. Business travelers that do this day in and day out, they are chomping at the bit to get back on an airplane. I am one of them. Leisure travel, that people frequently travel for leisure, they'll be the next ones to come. The last people that are going to return to aviation are the infrequent leisure travelers. But I think that's what we're going to see.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a great point. Is that, you know, when that hiring does pick back up again, this is a great opportunity for students currently, you know, with airline ambitions to get themselves positioned, you know, in the front of that line at that roadblock, so that they are, you know, the first to get hired or to catch up with the ones that were already prepared to be hired. So definitely a good outlook on that situation. Now, as we do move out of this, how do you suppose that Air Wisconsin's position to come out of the COVID situation?
Yeah, I think we're positioned fairly well. One of the nice things about being a privately held airline is our owners don't have to make tiny little decisions to justify their existence on a weekly basis to shareholders. They can go ahead and make long-term decisions and ride out storms. And that's what this company has done for 55 years. Whether we're talking about air traffic controller strikes or oil embargoes, 9/11, recession of 2008, introduction of the 117 rest rules in 2014. There have been a ton of storms that have reared their head in our 55-year history. And while other airlines sometimes have kind of gone up and down, like the front of Charlie Brown's t-shirt, we've always managed to kind of ride the crests out. You know, we're going to continue, our ownership and leadership is going to continue figuring out what needs to happen for the company's continued success. And so we're looking forward to continuing to go ahead and do what we do and be who we are once we're able to go ahead and return back to flying at our normal 100% level.
Great. We had a question come in that kind of leads into my next question for you. 6 months ago, you had many applicants that were former pilots who had left the industry. They pursued another career, and times were so good in aviation, they were considering it as to coming back to aviation. What would the future look like for these individuals?
It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be exactly the same way that it used to be, with a little bit of time behind it to go ahead and heal a couple of wounds of the industry. About 50% of the people that apply to Air Wisconsin, this is their second career. They've had a career already and they're looking to go ahead and maybe do something a little bit different. So it is going to be a very good looking environment for them. We definitely would go ahead and say that, you know, continue watching the industry, keep yourself proficient, keep yourself up and running, keep your experience building. And as soon as the industry is ready to go ahead and see you, be ready for it. That's one of the biggest things that changed with the 2015 1,500-hour rule. It wasn't the hours. 1,500 hours isn't an unusual number. It was the idea that now it was no longer experience, but hours that led to your airline career. Hours don't necessarily mean anything without good quality experience. I would tell any pilot, someone looking for a second career, a retirement career, or starting their initial career, make sure that you are a good, proficient pilot at the top of your game, constantly learning, constantly looking for good quality experience.
Great. And the question that came in that was similar to this is, in your honest opinion, at what age do you say, sorry, buddy, you missed your time? I'm approaching 40, and although I have a commercial multi and commercial single, I'm short by 1,100 hours, and I'm not a CFI. So is there an age cutoff where you
40
would
is
say-
nowhere near. There really isn't. Anyone that we hire, we are looking to when you look at the training cost that goes into getting them good and ready to be an airline pilot, is significant. And, you know, we'd love to go ahead and see about 2 good years out of that. So in my time, the most senior pilot that we have hired is 62. So I would say if you're 63, if you're 64, you know, things are a little bit different. Keep in mind that you can love aviation and love the airlines and work in both capacities and not necessarily be an airline pilot. There's training positions available for people of all ages. But I would say that if you're 40 and looking to build your hours and experience, you are so far from being too old. By all means, you know, put your nose to the grindstone, build all of your hours, get the experience, and we would love to have the chance to see you.
Another question that came in, do you feel that a bachelor's degree is a necessary requirement for a new hire? And then a follow-up is also, do you feel that it's necessary to spend, you know, a great deal of money to get trained at a specific college aviation program that takes 4 or 5 years, as opposed to training at a local private training program and working towards your degree at a community college on the side?
Good questions there, and I want to apologize for moving around. I needed to kind of relocate here a little bit. Is it necessary to have a college degree? It is not. To join a regional airline, a college degree is not required. About half of the airlines are still requiring a college degree when you go to the majors, but not so at the regionals. The thing to keep in mind is college doesn't have to happen with your aviation education. It doesn't have to happen before your aviation education. There is a college out in New York, Albert Einstein College. They work with the Airline Pilots Association a lot to construct a college degree for pilot candidates who are regional pilots who do not yet have their bachelor's degree. It gives them a whole lot of credit for their aviation education, and then it creates a couple online courses that they could do during their overnights, during layovers. So by the time they are ready to go to the major carriers, they do have their college degree. So first and foremost, the college degree required, not for the regionals. For the majors, some of the time that may change, but there are ways to go and do it that are a whole lot easier. So do you have to go ahead and go the way of an Embry-Riddle University, a 4-year college degree and all of that? You don't. The most important thing initially is going to go and be your aviation education. All of that being said, the world changes, people change, situations change. Having something else that you are good at, maybe having a course of study that wasn't aviation. Also, there are some huge benefits to that. I did not major in aviation, even though I did all my college education, my aviation education in college. I majored in speech communication, public speaking, and then physiology because I was pre-med for a while. But the moral of the story is I use my degree on a daily basis to continue talking about aviation. So I found a way to go ahead and not major in aviation, not have to go to an Embry-Riddle or a UND or some of these aviation specific schools. They can be pretty pricey. They do deliver a fantastic product, but they definitely can be pretty pricey. I found a way to go ahead and make college work a little bit better for me and what I do. So I think that's kind of a long-winded, and apologize, a long-winded answer to that question. A college degree, an aviation degree is not required. There's more than one way to successfully get into aviation. It's a little bit more like a baseball stadium where there are multiple entrances, and it just depends on what works for you.
Absolutely, and I think it's more going to be about, like you said, the quality of the training, the flight training that you're receiving. And then having that backup plan is always, you know, a good thing to have a degree in something other than aviation because of the often uncertainty of the aviation industry, as well as medical issues that some pilots could face down the road as well.
Absolutely. Those are all very, very good points.
All right. So my last question here for you tonight, Tim, would be what training advice would you give a new pilot seeking a career in aviation? And has this changed in the previous 6 months since we've been facing this current pandemic?
I'll answer that. I'm going to Quentin Tarantino that and answer it in opposite order. The answer I'm about to give you, no, it has not changed since all of this happened. The biggest advice I would give anyone is ask yourself any hour you put in your logbook or anything that you put on your resume, what did I learn from this? If you put an hour in your logbook and it's just an hour, it doesn't mean much. Yes, it may get you that airline interview. It may get you an opportunity for training, but you are not going to be successful in training unless you have learned a lot for every hour. Focus on experience. Focus on making yourself a better pilot, a better person. Be prepared to go ahead and show all of that in an interview, but find something to build quality experience. Building your hours and experience, you have to be a flight instructor. You do not. Being a flight instructor is something that I would recommend to everybody. They're easier jobs to find than some of the other jobs out there. They do teach a crew environment. They teach a regulation environment. They teach to be in an environment that is ever changing and to stay on the top of your game. But the biggest thing that being a flight instructor does is every flight is different. You are genuinely getting an hour of new experience and knowledge for every hour in the aircraft. I would actually argue that you probably get closer to 90 minutes to 2 hours of education for every hour that you can go and put in your logbook as a flight instructor. If you're not flight instructing, that's fine, but ask yourself if it's a mindless flying job or if it's things that you are learning. Remember that your goal as an airline pilot is flying IFR. It's being very comfortable IFR, being very confident. Find a job that's going to give you that kind of experience. And that is the training advice that I would give to anybody, is build experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Tim, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your advice, your wisdom, and your time tonight. So thank you so much, and hope you enjoy the rest of your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Logan. I definitely enjoyed it, appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you guys soon.
All right. Hopefully we'll be sending a bunch of pilots your way shortly.
Looking forward to it. Take care, guys.
Thank you. All right, guys. So that is it for tonight. Stay tuned. Next week, June 3rd, we'll be meeting with Lucan Smith of Textron Aviation, and we'll be talking about general aviation aircraft production as well as status. So have a nice night, guys. Thanks for joining us. Take care.